hand out interesting and flavorful items with a single use of a powerful spell tied to them for a different kind of treasure that you can hand out a lot more frequently than standard magic items. I first got this idea from the role-playing game Numenera, which has this idea called ciphers. A cipher is essentially a single-use item that has some kind of powerful ability to it, and they're kind of all over the place in Numenera. Because they're only single-use, you can tie a powerful ability to them, and you can also hand them out a lot more frequently than you would a permanent magic item. Relics fit really well into D&D 5th edition style of magic items because we're not really supposed to be handing out a lot of magic items in our 5th edition games, usually about one magic item per character for every 5 or so levels of play. But with relics, we can hand out items all the time because they are single use. We don't have to worry about them imbalancing our game. Sure, they might have this super powerful ability tied to a single item, but they're only going to get to use it once. A relic can actually be anything. It could be a cup, or a key, or a necklace, or a bracelet. It can be any kind of object that the characters could find. We can also tie an origin to the item. Maybe it's elven, or drow, or fiendish, or celestial. We can tie this origin to an element of history. Maybe it's from a specific old empire that the characters are dealing with. We also might make it unique by adding a condition to it. Maybe it's cracked, or ancient, or weathered, or pristine, or glyphed, or smoking, or radiant. And of course, the last thing we apply to our relic is a spell. We can either choose a spell of our own by picking up the player's handbook and flipping through it, or any 5th edition compatible book that has spells. In fact, this is a great way to use spells from third-party publishers that you might be not too keen on dropping into your game permanently, but when tied to a single item with a single use, that's a great way to throw in a single spell, even if you're not sure if it's a little bit too powerful or a little bit too weak. Both the Lazy DM's Workbook and the Lazy DM's Companion include random tables that you can use to generate relics very easily while you're prepping your game. I also have an article on Sly Flourish where you can generate any number of relics randomly to find some that might spark your interest and might be the kind of thing you want to drop into your game. You can find a link to this relic generator in the show notes to this video. Here are the 2 pages from the Lazy DM's Workbook that generate random items. Here we have the conditions themselves, the origin and condition of the items. And then down here we have the items themselves and the spell that we might apply to them. So for our first item, we have a elemental crumbling key that casts Flame Strike. An elemental crumbling key that casts Flame Strike. That's pretty cool. Let's roll another one. How about a hellish glowing crown that casts Blight? Also pretty awesome and pretty flavorful. Now you might be looking at these and say, Blight, like I'm not going to give that to my 3rd level characters. It's not even that cast Blight. I actually recommend that you give them relics that are more powerful than the kinds of things that they can cast or that they would normally get. Again, because it is only one single use. The characters might hang on to an item that casts Blight for a long time because they don't know when that ideal circumstance is going to show up for them to use it. And they know they have it, so they really like having this item. They really like discovering it because they know how powerful it is. And they like hanging on to it, but they don't actually like using it because it's only one use. Let's roll one more. I got double 20s. A gnomish moldering glove that casts slow. Again, pretty cool. These are really flavorful items. They're interesting to find out. Between these 4 tables, you can generate thousands and thousands of unique magic items. It's a really cool thing. I've been using it in my game now for 5 or 6 years, and they've never failed to disappoint. Now, every so often you might roll up a spell or you might choose to put a cantrip on an item like this. And if you use it with a cantrip, you can actually use some underused cantrips and then let the item cast it all the time. Cantrips are really meant to have an unlimited number of uses in general. So don't worry about giving out a relic that has a cantrip that you can use all the time. But where these relics really shine is when you put on a single use of a spell that's outside the power bounds of the current characters. That is when they get really interesting and the players will get really excited about them. Now, the game Numenera actually has a limit to the number of ciphers that you can carry, and we can apply this over to the relics that we throw in our 5th edition games too. You could say, for example, that if any character uses a relic when they already have 3 of them in their possession, they have to roll on the wild magic table. That's actually one way to kind of limit them. But what I found in my games is I don't really have to limit them at all because players like to hoard them. And it's okay that they hoard them. It's not really our responsibility to make sure that they use them all. And the real benefit of a relic is that they get excited when they receive it. It will certainly be fun when they've used it. And I've certainly seen relics used in massive battles that really change everything. We had one instance where somebody used one that had reverse gravity in a battle with a boss. It was fantastic. But it's okay if you let them hold on to the more items. You don't really have to put a limit in place. If you want to put a limit in place, you can put this idea that if anybody's carrying more than 3 relics, then when they use one, they have to roll in the wild magic table. The fun bit about that is players actually don't mind rolling on the wild magic table because some really interesting things can happen, but not all of them are good, so it can be a little bit chaotic. Another powerful feature about relics is they're wonderful vehicles for secrets and clues. When we have our 10 secrets and clues that we might reveal anywhere in our game, one of the ways that we can reveal those secrets and clues is through a relic. The players can find one of these strange items and they can learn about it and learn a piece of history. They can learn something about themselves, they can learn something about the history of the world, they can learn about a villainous plot. There's all kinds of information that you can relay to the players through the relics that they discover. What was the last thing about relics? It was just on the tip of my tongue. It was really important. Something that comes up is how should the players be able to identify what a relic can do? In my games, I just let them know. Once they pick up the item, once they actually study it or try to understand it, I just let them know that if they use this item, that they can use the spell that's on it. I make it almost instantaneous for them to figure this out. That way, if they happen to pick up a relic in the middle of a fight, they could use it right then if they want to. If you want to limit this a little bit, you can use the standard identification rules of 5th edition, in which they spend a short rest or they spend an hour studying the item to figure out what it can do, or something like Detect Magic could tell them. But generally speaking, I don't try to hide what a relic can do because I want them to know what it can do. I want the players to recognize that they picked up a significant item. Relics are really powerful magic items that we can put into our game. Because they have a limited use, we don't have nearly the restrictions on rewarding them as we do on permanent magic items. They're not going to break our game because they only work once and because players like to hoard these things. They'd rather hang on to them than use them when they know that they can only get one use out of them. And yet they add a really interesting chaotic element to our game. I suggest rolling up relics while you're preparing for your game. You can roll them randomly at the table, but every so often you want to tweak some features of it while you're looking at it, and it's better to do that before the game than during the game. When we put these relics into our game, they add a really interesting chaotic element. We know that we're putting in this equivalent of a nuclear bomb into our Stone Age game, and we're going to see this thing operate, and we don't even know how it's going to work. Are they going to use that single-use disintegrate item on the final boss? Maybe, but it'll be really epic when they use it. So relics are really interesting, powerful magic items. I've been using them in my game for years and I really love them, and I hope you will give them a try and use them in your game too. If you enjoyed this video, you can help me out by subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter, supporting me directly on Patreon, picking up any of my books, including the Lazy DM's Companion and the Lazy DM's Workbook, which have all of these tables that you can roll relics on, or subscribing to my videos right here on YouTube. Thank you very much, have a great day, and get out there and play some D&D.